Welcome everyone, I'm Tracy Fitzpatrick. Thanks for checking out Sarder TV, an idea sharing platform founded by Russell Sarder, author, investor, and CEO of Netcom Learning. And joining us remotely today in the studios is Mayo Clinic emergency physician, Dr. Richard Winters. He's also Director of Leadership Development of the Mayo Clinic Care Network, an executive coach and author. Here to talk about his latest book, You're the Leader, Now What? Thanks for joining us, Dr. Winters.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Let's give us an overview, if you would, of your background in medicine and the Mayo Clinic and how you kind of merged it with the business approach in becoming a director as well as an executive coach, surgeon, etc. How did it all come together for you?
That's right. Well, when I was born, that was exactly what I was meant to do, right? No, so I was in high school. I was not what my parents would say would like the star student. So I was like a C- student in high school, kind of into punk rock and skateboards and things like that. So there is hope for those out there who have children who are not yet succeeding. After high school, my grandma had Lou Gehrig's disease, and she came to our house, and we took care of her, and that it lit the spark for me for medicine. And then studied hard, got into medical school, went to Mayo Clinic's medical school, became an emergency physician. And then as you're practicing as an emergency physician, you're seeing things, taking care of patients one at a time. You're seeing maybe some opportunities to improve things. And to be able to do that, you need to enter a leadership role. And so started getting into leadership committees and then started seeing and hearing kind of different language, people saying different things, the senior leaders of the organization talking about finances and things. Had not learned about any of that in medical school. And so then I went and got an MBA. And then after the MBA, actually did a graduate training in executive coaching. Because what I found through the MBA program was coaching was a way for us to think about how we think and how to help others think more clearly. And then along with that, just started getting more and more leadership positions, running organizations, and then returned back to Mayo Clinic.
What actually inspired you to write your latest book, You're the Leader, Now What? And who is your target audience? Doctors, business people? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, it's for all of us. Anyone who is a leader at basically at any level who's stepping into these positions where your colleagues, your friends, they're all kind of disagreeing. There's really complex, thorny challenges, and everyone's looking to you to do, like, what do we do now? And so what I found in my executive coaching practice as I'm coaching leaders, this kind of common thing was like, now what? What do I do? And so I wanted to create a book that a leader could open up during those challenging times to figure out, how do I meet with individuals one-to-one? How do I facilitate these really thorny issues and challenges with groups? How do I understand the fears and worries? And how do we start to move forward together?
What do you think makes your book stand out from this crowded field, medicine leadership?
There are a lot of great books out there. I mean, really great books. But I wanted to bring a book together that would kind of bring all these separate ideas. It's almost like, I guess going back to, I used to be a DJ, and
oh my goodness, so was I. Yes,
really,
country western.
Yeah, there you go. And so you kind of figure out the songs, and you put all these great songs together, and so in my coaching practice, there's these like wonderful things out there, and I wanted to bring them all kind of together into a playlist, and then also kind of inject them with my own experience and the experience of the other leaders to really help someone kind of identify all these different tactics and things they can use at any time.
When medical professions such as yourself kind of switch gears to deal with the business side of medicine, do they lose some of their passion and expertise for medicine and their patients because you're juggling so many different things? What are your thoughts on that?
When I go in tomorrow, I'm working a shift in the emergency department. And when I go and see patients, I'll be seeing one patient at a time and really helping individuals one at a time. And I think the nice thing about a leadership position is you move from one at a time to really helping populations, whole groups of patients. Mm-hmm. And I think as leaders, the same thing, leaders in any organization, there are things that you're really good at and you can really help with sales or with marketing or engineering and things like that. Once you start to step into leadership roles, you really start to help groups of individuals kind of find their space and find their best way forward.
Why is it so difficult to find competent, ethical leaders? And has it become a problem more so lately with the state of what's been going on? Pandemic, post-pandemic, etc.
When we're looking at how we're finding leaders, I think first of all, you want to be developing leaders. And so within an organization, I think of leadership as being really leadership at all levels. And there's people who have formal leadership roles. There's CEO, VP, director. And then there's individuals who have these informal roles. These are the people that you go to. They don't necessarily have the title, but these are the people who really make things get done. And these are the people that people look up to try to figure out the way forward. And so I think our best organizations are identifying those individuals who really embody the values of the organization and have shown the ability to help facilitate and lead others moving forward. And you start from there.
Can you share a story with us where your medical and business brain kind of came into conflict?
When they came into conflict, that's interesting. I think so for me as an emergency physician, I can walk into a room, we see anything at any time, and so I can walk into a room and pretty quickly understand after a brief history and an exam what needs to be done. And in a leadership role, as I enter a committee or I'm running a meeting, those same sorts of reflexes can start to move forward, where I hear something and in a moment I feel like I know what can be done and what should be done. And actually, that's not a good way of leading. And so I guess the conflict there is really the instinct as the expert to really know what to do in the moment and to react versus the instinct as a leader, which is to step back, kind of put down my expertise, and then assume more of a facilitative role.
Your book talks a lot about effective tactics to address complex leadership challenges. Can you share some of those tactics with our audience?
Yeah, I think so. Oftentimes we have these meetings, and like 15 minutes in the agenda is this really complex issue, and within healthcare, it's staffing, like how we're going to staff and how many hours we're going to give individuals to staff, how much we're paying each other, how we're changing our processes, how we're merging cultures, organizations, how we're developing all these new things. And it's just 15 minutes of a meeting, and it does not tend to be a great way of kind of considering these really thorny challenges. And so what tends to happen in those situations is you have a leader who speaks up, maybe another loud individual or powerful individual in the room, and then they move forward. And what that does is it leaves everyone else in the meeting wondering, like, well, what was I even here for? Yeah, how about me? Do you think about what and we know that those sorts of decisions are less effective when a leader decides by themselves. It's much better when we're able to bring in the perspectives of others. And so I think as we're facing these thorny challenges, I like this kind of framework called row forward. And so what you do is first, the R in row is you develop a shared reality. And so I want to know what you think, and I want to know what everyone around the room thinks. We have disagreements, we have different perspectives, but all of those come together to give this more kind of real view of the challenge that we're facing. And so now we have shared reality. And so then, and only then, do you start to move forward to what are the options, the O in row forward, of the things that we might do. And then only after we come up with and brainstorm a bunch of options do we actually decide the way forward, the W in row forward, which is this is what we're going to do and this is what we're going to focus on. So we need to stop jumping to way forward. We need to start creating more shared reality. And within that sort of shared reality, we're going to find a better way forward.
What have been some of your biggest medical and business leadership challenges while working at the Mayo Clinic?
I mean, 'cause I think COVID was a pretty big one, right? I mean, I think that was for all of us.
I would assume so, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so
and it still is. It's still ongoing, obviously.
It's still ongoing. And so you hear about, okay, there's something happening in China. I'm not, it's a virus. We hear the news all the time about something emerging somewhere, and we think, yeah, that's never going to, affect us. And then all of a sudden, a few weeks later, whoa, some of our friends are getting sick. I'm seeing patients with these crazy, really severe disease on CT scan, and this is something quite different. And then all of a sudden, as our colleagues are getting sick, we have less people who can help take care of patients. And as patients, it's just a really serious situation. And so is this a situation where we're going to put this on the agenda for next week's meeting, and then we're going to have a task force moving forward? And the answer is no, you can't actually react in those sorts of challenges in that sort of way. This is a challenge where we need to kind of step up and make decisions. And so it's one of those things where, so within Mayo, we decided that there were a lot of financial challenges, that the physicians were going to take a pay cut. Well, and we decided how we were going to ration some of the resources that we had. These are decisions that just needed to be made. And it was a decision that was that needed to be made by the senior leaders. On the other hand, there were decisions about, like, how do we take care of patients with COVID? And these decisions then were delegated to the infectious disease specialists, emergency physicians, the critical care physicians. And so it's these sorts of challenges, very difficult, but our best leaders are really, they're agile. They're able to kind of bounce back and forth between chaos, I need to decide now, versus we have a little bit of time here, and then how do we bring lots of different perspectives together?
Why do you think it's so important for leaders to be more team-based when dealing with complex decisions, and can you share an example of this?
Each of us are really great at analyzing a situation. And so, typically, let's just think about a physician or a scientist, lots of data. And I can show you tons of spreadsheets about things that we're considering and why it should be this way in my experience and that sort of stuff. But embedded within that data is my own blind spot. And so I can be doing great analysis, but I'm likely missing out on key things. And so what you want to be doing, what I want to be doing to be able to make better decisions, is to have a team around me, each of them who has their own in-depth kind of analysis of what's going on, each of them who has their own blind spots. But as we come together as a team, we're able to start to see things that maybe, again, are more real perspective of reality and how we might move forward. And that occurs really with any of the complex decisions that we're making. Any of the things in the room where you're sensing that people are upset, that there's differences of opinion, that you're operating in unknowns, you really want to be looking at how does a team come together and make those sorts of decisions.
In your experience, which have been more prevalent, leaders who collaborate or those that simply want to go it alone, expedite things, get it done, especially during times like pandemics, infectious disease things, et cetera?
Yeah, hopefully both. Hopefully you have leaders who are doing both. But let's imagine a leader who just makes decision. And we see leaders like this in the news all the time. They're saying things that are very provocative. People are kind of circling around them, and there's also kind of a wake of disturbance and sorrow, oftentimes that based on the things that they're saying. That tends to work very well in an environment where things are static and where you're not needing a team of individuals behind you. And so those leaders tend to last for a shorter period of time. And on the other hand, there's maybe those leaders who they want to bring lots of individuals together and they want to collaborate and establish consensus. That works at some times. Mm-hmm. What you need are the leaders who are actually able to bring both those things together. The leaders who can push when you need to push, and on the other hand, step back and facilitate and coach and bring people together. Otherwise, your long-standing ability to lead is going to be challenged at some point. You're not going to be leading. You're not going to have followers.
Okay, so how complex do you think the chain of command is with so many hospitals being taken over by corporate bottom line focused entities? What changes have you been seeing over the years with that?
This is one of these things that's going to have multiple different perspectives. And I think from a corporate perspective, they have shareholders and they're wanting to create a business that is working well for the shareholders. And the shareholders are also patients. And so they're looking from that perspective. And then there's the hospitals that are not part of large corporate publicly traded entities that are serving communities or who are kind of looking more from the oversight of the perspective of those who are running that hospital kind of within that population. I think they both can work. I think the key thing for both of those sorts of organizations are that they have a mission and values and that they're holding close to those mission and values. If your mission and values are to serve patients, which is the prime value of Mayo Clinic, we're going to serve the needs of patients, and you start serving the needs of shareholders, probably not a good thing. If you're serving the needs of the CEO, probably not a good thing. And so in either of these organizations, I think they can be successful, but they do need to be kind of standing by these core missions and values that they hold.
So talk a little bit about the 5 domains you discuss in your book that outlines how leaders should be tailoring their decisions. And are you practicing what you preach as well?
Right. So we're having a meeting, right? And so we're talking about all these things. What kind of a decision are we making? And I think that if we ask most people, they'd be like, well, we're just going to decide. And so actually there's a way of thinking about what kind of a decision is this? And I love there's this framework by David Snowden that he published in Harvard Business Review, I believe it was in 2008, and it's called the Cynefin framework. So Cynefin, it's Cynefin, it's a Welsh term, but it's a way to identify what sort of a decision are we making? And so there are decisions that are clear. Like it is clear for you and I that to sit in our chair, we go bottom first. If either of us started putting head first, we'd be like, there's something going on here. There's something wrong, right? So there are things that are clear. It's clear for emergency physicians what we do when a patient comes in with a gunshot wound. There are just clear steps. Everyone in the room understands that. And so, but those oftentimes aren't the decisions that we're talking about. Then there are things that are complicated. And so complicated decisions require expertise. And so a patient may come into the emergency department with a heart attack. I'm not going to consult the orthopedic surgeon. It would not be helpful. They would not know what to do. I'm going to consult the cardiologist. They are the expert in taking care of heart attacks. And so as we're having meetings about things, there are things that actually sales should answer, actually engineering should answer, or actually HR should answer. And so we want to give those sorts of decisions to the experts. And then there's other kinds of decisions that are made when kind of the things are unknown, where we don't really, the things are rapidly changing, things are volatile, complex, ambiguous. And so there are those complex decisions. And within these complex decisions, what we need to be doing is we kind of put forward our expertise, like our perspective, but then develop this shared reality. We want to bring lots of different people together so we have a better kind of sense of what's going on and then proceed to options and the way forward. The final, there's kind of 4, is chaos. And so there are times when, just like when COVID hit, a leader just needs to make a decision. Like they have expertise, they need to rely upon the kind of their instincts, and it kind of in their own head. Oftentimes our best leaders have these almost imaginary board meetings where they can imagine the points and counterpoints of others, and they use that to bring things together and make decisions in the moment. What happens when we're having meetings and we're not understanding what kind of a decision? Is this complex or complicated or clear or chaotic? Is that we're confused. And then we're running meetings that are ineffective. People aren't talking at the same level, and we're not using the right decision-making process.
Okay, another byproduct of the pandemic obviously has been burnout. So how can leaders address the well-being of their staff, and what did you all do at the Mayo Clinic in regards to this? How did it work out?
Yeah, I think there's a couple frameworks I like here. And so one is there are multiple levels of thinking about burnout and well-being. And often if you go on social media, you're oftentimes going to be seeing individuals complaining about others, things that are being done to them. And that is one area. I mean, there are things, we're in situations which are quite difficult and that can cause burnout. But I like from an organizational perspective to think of like 3 different layers. And so one is at the organization, is burnout and well-being important? Are we measuring this? If we're not, then it's like me seeing a patient. I need to see the vital signs. If I don't see the vital signs, I'm likely not going to take good care of the patient. And so if you're running an organization and your vital signs are your costs and your revenue and your quality, but you're not looking at the burnout and well-being of the individuals who are actually producing that, we know that this is going to decrease quality. This is going to increase employee churn. This is going to decrease revenue, all those sorts of things. And so we want to be looking at that level. There's a second level, which is the way that we're interacting with each other. And so this is the way we're holding meetings. Are we working with individuals who are positive with each other? Or are we looking at individuals who are at odds with each other? Are we holding meetings where we're hearing the voices of and different perspectives of those within our diverse group of individuals or not? If we're not listening to each other, it's prime for burnout. And then the final thing is that individual level, and that is what are the things that we can do individually. And so exercise important, eating well is important, sleep. I know if I'm not exercising, eating well, and sleeping well, I'm going to be kind of crusty and I'm more likely to be burned out. And then also we hold assumptions about things. There's things that we believe which may be based on our past experience that I think it's good for us to question. And so that's kind of one framework. And then the second framework I think about is well-being. So what is well-being? And if I were to ask, and I give a talk to all of our new physicians and scientists as they're coming into to Mayo Clinic, and I can ask them, so name the 4 chambers of the heart, and they can name them, or like right. name the 12 cranial nerves, and they can name them. Name the components of well-being. They don't have names for them. Like we're talking about well-being, but we don't really have a language that we've developed around it. And I love there's some work from an individual, Carol Riff, out of University of Wisconsin, where she's looking at psychological well-being. And psychological well-being is different from hedonic well-being. Hedonic well-being is like, I had drinks last night and had a great meal, and today I felt good in the moment, but today I don't feel so good. So that's one sort of like, hedonic well-being in the moment. We're not talking about that. We're talking about psychological well-being, which is long-term. And there's this kind of mnemonic I created called pagers. And so P is purpose. And so we're going to be closer to well-being if we feel like we're involved in things that are aligned with our sense of purpose, our sense of values, the mission. And so when the organization and ourselves are in alignment, going to be good. The A in pagers is autonomy. And this is a sense that we can make a difference, that we're being heard. We have perspectives, not the sense that they're going to do what we want them to do, but the fact that when we move forward, we have a sense that we were heard and we were considered as we were moving forward. And G is personal growth. This is the sense that we can improve today. We can be better today than we were yesterday. E is environmental mastery. This is the sense that we have the resources that we need, or that at least the organization is trying to obtain the resources that we need to get the job done. R is positive relations with others. And then S is, and this is one that I see at all levels as I'm coaching from CEOs on down, this is the ability to have self-acceptance, to accept the fact that we at times make mistakes and that we can move on from that. It can be difficult. If any of these pagers, purpose, autonomy, growth, any of these sorts of things are hurt, we're more likely to be burned out and have less well-being. And so you can now think about systemic causes of autonomy. You can think about the way they're interacting and how we can encourage autonomy. We can think individually how we can encourage our sense of own autonomy. I like to put those two kind of frameworks together.
When you discuss leading in complex situations in your book, you use the term row forward, which we discussed briefly earlier. Can you explain this concept and share an example of it, the row forward?
So row forward is where we're coming up with shared reality first, and then coming up with options, and then deciding the way forward, which is different than rowing backwards, where we're actually deciding based on our own expertise, and then trying to figure out why things weren't working. And things weren't working because actually we had never developed a shared reality first. And so when we're dealing with complex challenges, you want to row forward. You want to gather people together and gain perspective before you decide on the options and the way forward.
So how important do you think the cultural environment is to staff members that leaders create?
Yeah, so first of all, what is culture? And we talk about culture a lot, and I think it's good. For me, culture is the values of the individual and the organization plus the behaviors. So culture is value plus behaviors. There's lots of organizations where we can look at the screensavers within the organizations and see the values, but then you see individuals, the leaders, who may not be exhibiting those values. Right. I mean, we can look at Enron. I think we're all familiar with Enron, and they had respect and integrity as their values. Were they living those values? And I think the federal indictments and the prison sentences would reveal that actually there was probably a mismatch between the screensavers and the actions of the leaders. And so how to have a good culture is you have the values of the organization and the leaders embody, display, reflect on those values in real life.
Many organizations, employees feel like they can't actually speak their mind. It could backfire on them. How do you address this issue and encourage them to speak their mind honestly without repercussions, worrying about repercussions?
Yeah, I mean, so I think you can be a leader when you're just going to decide and you don't want the input of others. Maybe you're afraid of the input of others. And I don't know how well that goes, honestly. I think that you can probably push that power for a little bit, but at some point you start to have employee turnover, you start to have factions within the organization that aren't working together. And so I think our best laid strategies can be hurt by these kind of monsters in the darkness, the back channel discussions that people have, the disagreements that we're not bringing forward. And so I think it's really up to the leader to really shine a light on the fears and worries of the individuals that they're working with. Because within those fears and worries are the real challenges that you need to face as you're moving forward. And what better than to shine the light on them and then try to figure out how you can decrease the chance of those challenges from occurring. You can kind of make those monsters go away. And so our best leaders will ask, so what are your fears and worries about moving forward with this? What are the challenges you think that we're going to face? And they see this opportunity not as people are disagreeing with them, because a lot of leaders feel like they need to have control and they need to know what it's doing. And if we invite other opinions, it's going to actually put their leadership in question. But it actually strengthens their leadership. It allows them to see a perspective of what's going on in their organization and the world from a more real perspective, and then they can help the organization move forward from beyond that. Otherwise, kind of these monsters in the dark are going to arise at some point, and your leadership is going to be questioned.
Okay, so obviously we are deep into data-driven analysis, analytics across all fields, organizations, spectrums. Explain what you mean when you talk about analysis paralysis, and how can leaders avoid this?
Yes, right. So analysis paralysis, and this is something that you can get a lot of times with physicians, where you ask a question and people want to see, show me the data, show me the data, show me the data, and you can like endlessly talk about this. And you can see this on Twitter. You can see people like, show me the data, show me the data. You do want to have data. You do want to have things informed, but at some point you also need to make a decision. And so I think a way around that is, again, for me, I'm going to have my data, but within my data is also the blind spots. I'm looking for specific things. So a way to get around this sort of decision paralysis is getting groups of individuals together, each with their own different data. And sometimes the data disagrees. That's just the way things are. Things aren't necessarily black and white. They're not necessarily ones and zeros. Oftentimes you'll have opposing data, well-run studies that show two different things. That's the reality of the situation that you need to move forward from. But you do need to move forward if you're deciding that you need to make a decision.
Okay, now what advice would you give to the next generation of leaders in order to help them achieve a collaborative work culture, great working space?
For me, as I trained to be a coach, I just found this whole different way of thinking and of helping others. And it's a way of thinking about how we think individually as leaders, and then also how do we help our colleagues, whether it's one-to-one or groups of individuals. And so I think for future leaders, an essential skill, and actually for good friends, an essential skill is understanding when to shut your mouth and ask questions and like help your colleague make sense of their own world, as opposed to you saying what you think that they should do. So leadership, I think, is very much about developing leaders, and our best leaders are coaches, and they're either coaching one-to-one or they're facilitating groups. And so I think you need to learn how to do that.
Dr. Winters, thank you for all your valuable insights, and best of luck with your new book.
Thank you for having me. It's been nice talking to you.
And that's it for this edition of Sarder TV. We hope you enjoyed and learned something new today. Until next time, I'm Tracy Fitzpatrick. Thanks for watching.